Welcome to our second part of videos on how to play Gloria's Fleeting Napoleonic. In this video, we're going to cover setting up a points-based game, which you can find on pages 14 to 24 in the rulebook. So let's get right into it. So you'll see on page 14 there's a sequence you need to follow. It looks complex, but actually it's pretty quick going. You can do this within 20 minutes if you are an experienced player. So you work through the steps A to K. And I'll take you through those now. So the first thing under A is dice for region. So you'll see in the rule book, in the army lists, each army has options of regions. Each player rolls a single dice, unmodified. If the dice numbers are tied, then you roll again. And the player with the higher score selects the region from either his or his opponent's available options. Then you dice to block enemy strategies. So this is dependent on the quality of your commander, which tells you how many dice you can roll to block their strategies. And we'll talk the strategies at the next step. So if you've got an inert commander, you don't get to roll any dice, so you can't block enemy strategies. This is the quality of the CNC of the core commander. If you're a competent commander, you get 2 dice. A skilled commander, you get 4 dice. And an exceptional commander, you roll 6 dice. And then how do you use those dice? So this is the number of enemy strategies you can block. So obviously an inert commander can't block any. The competent commander can choose one of the 2 numbers off their dice to block a strategy. The skilled commander can use 2 of the dice. And the exceptional commander can block 3 strategies that they rolled and when you were dicing earlier. Then you go to the choose and reveal strategy step, which is step C. There's 6 possible strategies to choose from, each with advantages and disadvantages, noting, of course, that you can only choose the strategies that haven't been blocked by your opponent. So this mechanic means you can never come to a game knowing exactly what strategy you're going to choose because there's a good chance your opponent might block it. So let's run through the strategies. Strategy 1 is called positional defense. The advantages of this is you're allowed to place a large hill in your deployment area. Your opponent deducts 1 when trying to move your terrain, so you have a bit more say over the terrain. And you can use reverse slope and strong point, which we'll talk about later. The disadvantage of this strategy is that all the visible troops must be deployed before your opponent deploys any troops. Remembering reverse slope means you can hide things, but you have to have the hills in your deployment area for that. And the other disadvantage is you can't move out of your deployment area for the first 2 turns of the game, so it kind of limits the initiative that you have at the beginning of the game. Flexible defense, strategy 2, the advantages of this is that you get to hold 1 division back in reserve off table. And as with positional defense, you can also use reverse slope and strong point. And the disadvantage of this strategy is that you can't move out of your deployment area for the first turn, as against the first 2 turns for number 1. Flexible defense is probably more popular than positional defense because of the fewer disadvantages you find in tournaments. Probe, one of the most popular strategies and most popular ones to block. So the advantages are your opponent deploys his whole army before you deploy any units. The opponent can't use reverse slope. You get told which flank and how many divisions are flank marching. And then you record the off-table divisions after deployments. And talking about off-table divisions, the disadvantages of probe is you only get 1 division starting on table. So think of it as your advance guard, and the rest of your army is either in reserve, which is 1 division, and then the others have to come on as reinforcements, which have to be diced for. So it's got some disadvantages, but some huge advantages, which is why it's quite popular. Flank march, probably the most popular strategy to both take and block. The advantages are you get at least 1 division on a flank march. And only 1 on table, or at least 1 on table. So you could choose to have all your divisions flank marching except 1, or you could just have 1 flank marching. The disadvantages, of course, is the uncertainty of when the flank march might arrive. But in Gloria's Fleeting, it's actually, the flank march is relatively easy to come on, so hence why it's a popular strategy. Strategy 5, prepared attack. So the advantages of this is kind of, think of the pre-bombardment phase of a battle. So you get to deploy artillery up to the halfway line, and you get 1 to 3 rounds of fire before starting the first turn. So think of it as a free shot. The disadvantages is that you can't make a double move in your first turn. So there's a bit of a disadvantage there. You lose a bit of initiative And if your guns are too far forward, you might even find they get a bit they get jumped because you can't get up to them fast enough. So you've got to watch out for that. And then frontal assault. So this is for the aggressive player, aggressive strategy. So all units get a free double move in the first turn, or even a triple move if that's permitted to your troop type. So we'll talk about that in the movement phase. But this is if you really want to get into the face of your opponent quickly. The disadvantages: you subtract 1 dice from rolls to move opponent's terrain, so you have a bit less say over terrain. Normally the attacker deploys second, but if you've chosen frontal assault, you actually deploy your first division first, rather than the defender, unless they choose positional defense, strategy 1. And then the other one is you cannot make any wheels during the first turn, and you can't change formation during the first turn. So a few constraints, but again, 6 is probably another pretty popular strategy to both choose and block. So now let's now get on to the next stage, which is establishing who attacks. And it's quite simple. The player who's chosen the higher numbered strategy is the attacker. So if you choose 6 and your opponent chooses 5, you're the attacker. There's only a little bit of complexity if you both choose the same number. And so how does that work? So if both players chose positional defense, the defender, if you both choose the same strategy, you roll a dice, adding the level of your core commander, and then the player with the higher score chooses whether to attack or defend. So if you've both chosen positional defense, the defender will deploy his strong point troops first, followed by the attacker, and then the defender deploys the rest of the on-table troops first. So the quality of your general can help you if you've both chosen the same strategy. If you both choose flank march, the defender strategy is changed to flexible defense. If you both chose probe, the attacker will deploy his on-table troops first, so his on-track, which is only 1 division. And then if both players chose frontal assault, the attacker will deploy his on-table troops first. Right, then we get to terrain choice and placement. This is on page 17, and there's an image here of the table that you'll find on that page. So there are the different regions across the top, which you'll see in the army lists, depending on which army you've got. You get the types of terrain features available, so 10 different types of terrain features that you can choose from. And then at the top there, you can see there's compulsory terrain. So the defender chooses 3 pieces from, well, they have to take those 3 compulsory pieces. And then those are the optional pieces. So and then there's a placement order. So once you've all chosen your terrain, you place it in that order 1 to 10. So getting on to terrain choice and placement. So there's a sequence to doing it. So the first thing is the defender places a straight road across the central sector. In the image, it's shown as straight across the table. It can be a diagonal, but it's still got to be straight. But as long as it's in the central sector and the road is straight, it doesn't have to run parallel to the sides of the table. Then players choosing positional defense place a large hill in their deployment zone. So that's one of their big advantages, is getting that free hill, which they can hide behind or on. The defender then takes those 3 compulsory pieces for that region, plus 2 to 4 of the optional pieces. The attacker chooses 2 to 4 of the remaining optional features, and then all terrain under 3 and 4 is chosen before any is placed on table. So you place 1 and 2 are placed, and then you go to 3 and 4 after that. And then finally, players place their terrain in the order shown on the terrain table on the previous slide. So then let's run through steps F to J. Step F is placing your line of communication marker. The defender goes first, and the rule for this is it must touch that central road as well as the player's rear edge, which will obviously be in the central sector. You then place redoubts if you've taken redoubts, which can be placed up to the halfway line and must be in open terrain, and they also must include a defending unit. Then you record the arrival point of flank marchers, reserves, and reinforcements. So flank marchers can arrive in one of those 4 sectors shown on the picture. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So basically your left flank or your right flank, his half or your half is what that is. Whereas reserves and reinforcements arrive off your baseline in one of the 3 sectors, so left, center, or right. So you need to record that, and then just check some exceptions if you've chosen probe. Then you deploy units and commanders. So starting with the defender, unless the attacker took frontal assault, you deploy 1 division at a time alternately. remembering that if your opponent chose strategy 1, positional defense, they'll place their whole army that's visible. And then the CNC and the artillery, you'll remember from the previous video, the CNC controls all the artillery units. They are placed last. So you place all your divisions, and then in any order you choose, and then you place your CNC and your artillery last. And strong points, so that's where you are fortifying a town outside of your deployment zone, and no closer than 6 inches to your opponent's baseline. Those are strong points. They must be deployed before enemy units not in redoubts are deployed. And a reminder, the strong point is only available if you chose strategy 1 or 2, so positional or flexible defense. Then finally, reverse slope units. So this is if you chose strategy 1 or 2, they are deployed at the start of the defender's first turn, unless the enemy took probe, in which case you can't have any reverse slope units. And reverse slope units must be touching a hill and not visible to the enemy. So within those tram lines shown on the image, so those parallel lines. So that's where your reverse slope units must be. And then finally, step J is you carry out bombardment. So if you chose strategy 5, prepared assault, prepared attack, then the artillery can be placed up to the halfway line. If there are no enemy in arc or range, you can actually move them a further 6 inches or pivot them. And then you get 1 round of fire if your opponent took frontal assault, 3 rounds of fire if your opponent chose positional defense. Otherwise, you get 2 rounds of fire. And that's before turn 1 even starts. Then the last thing is the turn sequence. So now you're ready to play. On the back of the rule book, there's a very handy sequence of play. I advise guys to, when you're playing, even experienced players, always just follow this because it's so easy to forget one of the steps. But that's on the back of the book, and we'll go through these sequences in subsequent videos. The next video being the command phase. So thanks for listening. I hope that was useful, and we'll see you for the next video.